to say is I am here next Wednesday, even though Monday I start some vacation. We're going to be camping, but I'm going to be here Wednesday, and then I'll be here Sunday as well for Father's Day. But then the next 2 Wednesdays, on the 29th, I'll not be here, and Jim Shepard from Medford, you know, the guy that sits over here, he's going to teach a class on King Saul, a character study. And then following that, on July the 6th, Don is going to take King David. Since we're not covering Saul or David, we're covering a little bit of David like tonight, but that's it. But you'll do David as a character study. You can go any way you want with it, okay? And he's going to do the same with King Saul. That'll at least cover all the kings by the time we're done with this quarter. So again, I'm here next Wednesday night for the lesson number 3, a wise choice and a bold ruling. And your homework assignment is to read 1 Kings chapter 3. For tonight, your homework was to read the first 2 chapters. Securing the Throne is session 2. I guess, I don't know, I'm always kind of fearful if this is even appropriate, and I'm always scared of the results. Should I ask, did anybody read the 2 chapters? Oh, good, good. It's not my intention to read these 2 chapters and do verse by verse, but I am going to summarize, and basically you're going to think we could have read the 2 chapters. What I want to do is summarize, give a little bit of backstories. Chapter 1 is chock full of a lot of names. Did y'all notice that? With all of them have a backstory, and we'll cover some of the backstories. And then, of course, I'm going to actually quote from both chapters 1 and 2 in certain sections. So everybody in 1 Kings in your Bible, and on page 6 on your notes. And I'm not one that really loves just reading the lesson, and you're probably not one that's all that hip on being read to when you're reading it for yourself as well. It's kind of how that the teacher last Sunday night at church in Pawhuska did, but it was a good lesson, and but being read to. But I'm going to do this anyway and try to liven it up a little bit. Are y'all ready? I say, are you ready? Peggy's ready. Peggy's ready. All right, here we go. Okay, King David becomes old and he becomes cold. Okay, what do? They get him a girl, a virgin, a Shunammite woman named Abishag, okay? But her job is to attend to all his needs and to lie with him. I'm assuming, he's probably in bed all the time, but to keep him warm, to lie with him, but no sexual relations, okay? Kind of interesting, isn't it? I don't know about you, it kind of creeped me out a little. Just, I'm being honest, it's a little creepy. But it is what it is. I have nothing more to say about that yet. I'm not David, that's right. I know that, when we're out camping, and especially before we had insulated camp RVs, we were in tents. It was warmer when you had more people in a sleeping bag or next to each other, okay? We just huddle up and it gets a little bit warmer and it's a lot nicer and more bearable. That's all I got to say about that. All right, so one of David's sons by his wife Haggith, the son's name is Adonijah, and at this time he is David's oldest son, decides for himself, okay, Dad's dying. I'm going to be the next king. That makes sense when you compare it to other monarchies of all around, okay? It's just tradition, right? So he sets himself up as king. He gathers a lot of livestock to make a sacrifice. He's going to get horses and chariots, and he has 50 men who run ahead of him because he wants his entourage feel this paparazzi aura about him. And he has the support of Joab, which is King's nephew, who killed Absalom, David's son Absalom, who had revolted against his dad. And he has the support of a priest named Abiathar. And Abiathar is actually a co-high priest with Zadok. He's the only son of Ahimelech who escaped the Nob massacre at the hands of King Saul. You can read about this in 1 Samuel 21, and I put the reference there in case you wanted to. If we run out of time or run out of things to say and still have time left, we'll come back and read it, but I didn't think it was necessary right off the bat that we go look at that story. But he has the support of Joab, this priest Abiathar, and then there's another priest named Zadok, I just mentioned, who does not support Adonijah. Neither does Benaiah. Benaiah is in charge of the special guard, and neither does Nathan the prophet. Now, we remember Nathan the prophet probably more than anything else as the one who came to David to tell him about God knows what you've done with Bathsheba and her husband Uriah. He's the one that's famous for saying, "You're the man. You're the man," okay? That's Nathan the prophet. And a couple other guys, Shimei and Ray. And these were, and David's special guard. They did not support Adonijah's move to make himself king. So he's got Joab and he's got Abiathar, one of the priests, but he doesn't have these other guys. Okay? Adonijah takes sheep, cattle, fattened calves to the stone of Zoheleth near Enrogel, and he's going to make a sacrifice, and he's inviting everybody he knows, all his brothers, all the king's sons, all the royal officials of Judah, except for Nathan, Benaiah, and especially Solomon. That's the younger brother from another mother, okay? He does not include them. All right, so Nathan knows about this, doesn't he? And Nathan knows this is not right. And Nathan is aware that David has made a promise to Bathsheba that their son together, which is Solomon, is going to be the next king. So Nathan takes it on himself to go to Bathsheba, and he gives her this warning and a plan. And he says Adonijah has declared himself king. And he says you need to protect yourself and the life of your son. You're going to be under a threat. If Adonijah makes himself king, you're in danger. Your lives are in danger. This is typical in monarchies, isn't it? This is very typical, okay? And so he says, here's the plan. You're going to go into his presence and do this humbly, bowing down, all that stuff. And you're going to talk to David and remind him of the promise that he had made to her about Solomon. And you're going to say, this is what Adonijah is doing, and that he's got all this support, and he's got this big celebration going on right now of this sacrifice going on down in Rogel, and you need to do something. You need to go and tell him this. When you do that, as you're still there talking with him, I'll come in and reiterate that. I'll confirm those words, and I will also say, didn't you tell us that Solomon, not Adonijah, but Solomon would be the next king? And then we'll of course, raise that awareness for David in hopes that David will then expedite something before it's too late. Everybody with me so far? Okay. She does exactly as Nathan has suggested, including the part that, by the way, there was some people not invited. Solomon wasn't invited to this. Already, that's a clue that Adonijah's move is a little bit stealth-like, hidden from Solomon and Bathsheba and Nathan and Benaiah. He's trying to get this under the radar, isn't he? And she does exactly what she is told to do, And let's read verses 20 and 21 to see a statement that she makes that's not coached by necessarily Nathan, but I love how she brings this up. This is verse 20. My Lord the king, the eyes of all Israel are on you, to learn from you who will sit on the throne of my Lord the king after him. Otherwise, as soon as my Lord the king is laid to rest with his ancestors, I and my son Solomon will be treated as what? Criminals. I'm not going to say she's added, but I think she's embellished, or she's at least put her touch to this personalization of what Nathan's instructions are about to make it even more poignant in front of David. And I think it works, don't you? And then guess what? As soon as she said that, Nathan comes in, bows down, does all that pomp and circumstance protocol. He's reiterating everything Bathsheba told him and clarifies, by the way, this is going under the radar because Zadok wasn't invited, Benaiah wasn't invited, Solomon wasn't party to this. And then he asked this of David, verse 27. Is this something my Lord the king has done without letting his servants know who should sit on the throne of my Lord the king after him? In other words, did you change your mind and not tell us? That's basically what he's asking, okay? And so, David, with that information, instructs Zadok, Nathan, Benaiah, to put Solomon on David's own mule. This is a role of affirmation, isn't it? This is my stamp of approval. He's going to ride my mule. And to take him to Gihon to be anointed king of Israel. They do this. They take him to Gihon, anoint him with oil. They sound a trumpet. And they all shout, "Long live King Solomon!" Followed by all the people playing pipes and shouting, and it causes the ground to shake. That's how much commotion and noise they are making with this announcement of Solomon being king. Guess what's close by? In Rugo. And they hear this, that noise. Adonijah and his guest hear the noise coming from Jerusalem, or from Gihon. And they wonder what's going on. As a matter of fact, Joab asks, what's the meaning of all the noise in this city? Well, here comes Jonathan, Abiathar's son, and they speculate, oh, good. This is good news because Jonathan's going to bring us good news. Was it good news? Well, it wasn't for them, was it? As a matter of fact, here's what he says in verse 43. Not at all, Jonathan answered. Our Lord King David has made Solomon king. The king has sent with him Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, Benaiah son of Jehoiada, and the Kerethites and the Pelethites, and they have put him on the king's mule. And Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet have anointed him king in Gihon. From there they have gone up cheering, and the city resounds with it. That's the noise you hear. Moreover, Solomon has taken his seat on the royal throne, and also the royal officials have come to congratulate our Lord King David, saying, may your God make Solomon's name more famous than yours, and his throne greater than yours. And the king bowed in worship on his bed and said, praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has allowed my eyes to see a successor on my throne today. I think what David does in his action is just exactly what needed to be done, to have a public show of this is my choice. And he garnered the rapport of the people quickly, didn't he? He didn't waste time. Once he became aware of Adonijah's plot, with the help of Nathan and Bathsheba, he nips this in the bud, doesn't he? How successful is this? It's very successful, isn't it? Adonijah lose support just like that. And what does Adonijah do? He's scared, and he runs into the temple, grabs the horns of the altar, and he's asking that his life be spared. What he has done is treason and is punishable by death, and he's pleading for mercy, isn't he? And Solomon is willing to spare Adonijah's life under the condition that you show yourself to be worthy. Okay? Adonijah was brought in before Solomon. He bows down to him, and Solomon told him, go home. Go home. I love that. Go home. Okay? You're done. That's chapter 1. Everybody with me so far? All right. Before King David dies, he gave this charge to Solomon. Let's read this together. It's chapter 2, verses 2 through 9. I'm about to go the way of all the earth, he said. So be strong, act like a man, and observe what the Lord your God requires. Walk in obedience to him and keep his decrees and commands, his laws and regulations as written in the law of Moses. Do this so that you may prosper in all you do and wherever you go, and that the Lord may keep his promise to me if your descendants watch how they live, and if they walk faithfully before me with all their heart and soul. You will never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. Now you yourself know what Joab, son of Zeruiah, did to me, what he did to the two commanders of Israel's army, Abner, son of Ner, and Amasa, son of Jether. He killed them, and shedding their blood in peacetime, as if it was in battle. And with that blood he stained the belt around his waist and stained the sandals of his feet. Deal with him according to your wisdom. I think that's interesting. I'll come back to that in a minute. According to your wisdom, but do not let his gray head go down to the grave in peace. But show kindness to the sons of Barzillai of Gilead, and let them be among those who eat at your table. They stood by me when I fled from your brother Absalom. And remember, you have with you Shimei, son of Gera, the Benjamite from Bahurim, who called down bitter curses on me the day I went to Manaim. When he came down to meet me at the Jordan, I swore to him by the Lord, I will not put you to death by the sword. But now do not consider him innocent. You are a man of wisdom. Again, I find that interesting. You will know what to do to him. Bring his gray head down to the grave in blood. And then, of course, David dies, okay? So the charge included the following directives. Be strong. Act like a man. Observe what the Lord requires. And he's basically saying, I have made the promise, or God made the promise with me, that if my descendants walked faithfully and watched how they live, and he's implying that I'm having you walk faithfully, watch how you live, and expect the people to do this, right? Well, with all of their heart and soul. And then deal with Joab as for what he's done. Show kindness to sons of Barzillai, and deal with Shimei because of how he treated me when I went to Mahanaim. Mahanaim. That's probably how that should be said. Those are the instructions. Let's go to that reference in 2 Samuel, because I thought this was interesting of how he was treating David. This is 2 Samuel 16. How many of you know about this story or have heard this? Because I'm going to be honest with you, I know I've read this, but I really hadn't connected it to the 1 Kings reference that this was part of what was going on, okay? So it is 2 Samuel chapter 16, verse 5. As King David approached Bahurim, a man from the same clan as Saul's family came out from there. And of course, now you know there's a rivalry because that's from Saul's side, and there was rivalry between Saul and David. His name was Shimei, son of Gera, and he cursed as he came out. This is King David he's cursing at. He pelted David and all the king's officials with what? Stones. Though all the troops and the special guard were on David's right and left. As he cursed, Shimei said, "Get out, you murderer, you scoundrel. The Lord has repaid you for all the blood you shed in the household of Saul, in whose place you've reigned. The Lord has given the kingdom into the hands of your son Absalom. You have come to ruin because you are a murderer. Then Abishai, son of Zeruiah, said to the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me over and cut off his head. And King David said, what? Well, what's this got to do with you, son of Zeruiah? If he's cursing because the Lord said to him, curse David, who can ask, why do you do this? David then said to Abishai and all the officials, my son, my own flesh and blood is trying to kill me. How much more than this Benjamite? Leave him alone. Let him curse, for the Lord has told him to. Now, I don't know where it's documented that the Lord told him to do this, but David is speculating a what if here. Kind of reminds me in Acts 5 when Gamaliel was talking about leave Peter and John alone, because if this work be of man, it's going to come to nothing, but if it's of God, you can't fight against God. Remember that? David is saying, who knows? God may have told him to do this. I'm not going to go against God. David didn't really feel like Shimei was a big threat, did he? He's well protected. Those stones are not reaching him. You know, he's getting cursed, all right. He's been called a murderer. And it goes on. Watch, verse 12. It may be that the Lord will look upon my misery and restore to me this covenant blessing instead of his curse today. Verse 13, so David and his men continuing along the road while Shimei was going along the hillside opposite him, cursing as he went and throwing stones at him and showering him with dirt. I'm picturing that scene in my mind. It's like, this guy's got guts. He's got the king with all the king's guard around him, and he feels like he can go and make this kind of threatening statement. And it says in verse 14, the king and all the people with him arrived at their destination exhausted, and there he refreshed himself. And I'm not sure if the exhaustion was from the traveling or just the constant belittling of Shimei. You know, go ahead, Mom. I do too. He was upset that his preconceived notion of who should be king, which obviously was Saul in the beginning and should have been on Absalom's side, and you know, here's David sitting in a place that he shouldn't reign. That was his opinion, and he was letting his opinion be known. Okay. All right. David dies. He reigns 40 years total. And I said last week that these three kings of the United Kingdom, each one of them had a 40-year reign, 40, 40, 40. David's happened to be 7 in Hebron and 33 in Jerusalem. Adonijah, and we don't know how much time passes. Remember that guy? The oldest son who tried to take the throne on his own, comes into Bathsheba one day. And what's he want? Abishag, that Shunammite virgin girl that lied with King David to keep him warm and tend to his needs. She had to have been very beautiful, and he wants Abishag as his wife. He convinces Bathsheba to go to David, or Solomon, to make this request. And when she goes in to make the request, she asks her son Solomon, please don't refuse me of this request. How does Solomon respond? You might as well have him be asking for the throne. That's kind of how he responded. If you read verse 22 there, I'm back in 1 Kings. Let me turn back over there. Verse 22, why do you request Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? You might as well request the kingdom for him. After all, he's my older brother. Yes, for him, and for Abiathar the priest, and Joab, son of Zeruiah. Just go for the whole 9 yards here, you know. I'm just kind of thinking this is a little bit comical in a way. Well, Mom, what are you doing? And he does not honor what his mom's asking, does he? As a matter of fact, what does he do instead? He tells Benaiah to go kill him for such a request. Wow. Go kill him. And he strikes him down. Solomon spares Abiathar's life, and the reason given is because he did carry the ark from my father David, and he's kind of respecting Abiathar as being in the past a co-high priest, but he does remove him from the priesthood here, and that fulfills a prophecy about Eli's house at Shiloh that was recorded back in 1 Samuel chapter 2. Because of Eli's sons that were wicked, God had said to Eli, your descendants will not continue in this priesthood. And that was the fulfillment of that prophecy. Joab heard about Adonijah and Abiathar, the fact that Adonijah is killed and Abiathar is removed from the priesthood. And he flees to the tent of the Lord and grabs the horns of the altar. But Solomon had Benaiah strike him down. Let's read verses 30 and 31. So Benaiah entered the tent of the Lord and said to Joab, the king says, come out. He says, no, I will die here. Benaiah goes and tells Solomon, this is what Joab says. And the king said to Benaiah, well, do as he says. If he wants to die there, that's where he's going to die. And he strikes him down dead. Solomon replaces Joab with Benaiah as head of the army and Abiathar with Zadok as the high priest, sole high priest. And then there's Shimei. Now this is interesting. David's charge to Solomon about Shimei is to not let his gray head go down in the grave peacefully. And I forgot to go back to something that David had said to Solomon. Twice, David affirms the fact that he considers Solomon to be a person with wisdom. What's interesting about this is before Solomon asked for it. That's in chapter 3. I think that's interesting. He says, you use your wisdom. You deal with it how you see fit. But don't let his gray hair go down to the grave peacefully. But Shimei is in support of Solomon and not Adonijah in the beginning of this story. Did you see that? Do you remember that? Shimei, along with Ray and Nathan and Benaiah and Zadok, they're all in support of Solomon being king. So Solomon kind of says what? I'm going to show you some mercy. I'm not going to have Benaiah strike you down dead. Well, not yet anyway. You can build your house where? Build your house right here in Jerusalem. Get John Haberger to do it. He'll do a nice job, right? And you have to stay put. You can never leave Jerusalem. Once you do, what will happen? You'll be cut off. And he says, I'll do that. I mean, I'd say that too. That sounds good to me. I was supporting you from the beginning anyway. So it's happy. 3 years go by, and what happens? Shimei's got 2 slaves that run off. Is it Gath? I think they go to Gath. He goes in pursuit of these slaves. And he brings them back home. And Solomon got wind of this. Didn't I tell you, stay put in Jerusalem? And because you disobeyed, and he orders Benaiah to strike him dead. Look at verses 44 and 45 of chapter 2. You know in your heart all the wrong you did to my father. Now the Lord will repay you for your wrongdoing. But King Solomon will be blessed, and David's throne will remain secure before the Lord forever. Then the king gave the order to Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, and he went out and struck Shimei down, and he died. And the last passage, or the last verse, is the kingdom was now established in Solomon's hands. All right? Any questions that you guys have, or assessments or observations now that we've summarized those 2 chapters? Was that go ahead, Colleen. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I was thinking about that too. If my mom is going to say, I got a favor to ask, son, I'm going to listen, right? And she's going to say, and please don't refuse me. Please give this to me. And I'm going to assume that this is going to be an honorable request, and I'm going to say yes. So I'll do it, whatever it is. You know, ask for the moon, whatever it is. And then she asked for my lifetime fishing license. She's not getting it. Do what? Yeah, well, it's the same. I have a combination, so she's not getting that, or I know what you're talking about, because does Solomon go back on his promise? Yes, whatever it is. I think it was probably premature for him to have said well, let me hear the request first, is what he should have said. And that's probably why he will get more wisdom later. Yep. I know, because there's a couple of examples where that was an affront, an offensive thing to go ask for your father's concubines, which she would be considered a concubine, but just with no sexual relations. And that she would be, considered part of the, I know this is belittling women, and I hate to put it this way, but she's kind of considered the spoils of, what he thinks he could salvage in the fact that he's being spared, okay? But can I have a little bit of can I have the girl? And I don't know why Bathsheba will go for this. She, this to me is a little bit, well, it's a lot her fault. But I think Solomon is justified in how he thinks, I can't believe that you're asking for that. I think he's justified in saying that, because this is not a request I would have expected of you, Mom. Don't you realize, this was a threat and could later be a threat? I don't think she does either. Yeah, that could be. Sam?
I guess my suggestion would be that as a mother, she was trying to protect her son, saying, give him this request, and he'll go away, and he won't be a problem.
And maybe and this is a lot of speculation, which we get really dangerous when we do this, but it could be, well, better Adonijah has her than her to distract Solomon and put him in a compromising position. We'll know he'll load up with some concubines later, right? And wives as well. As one third grader put it, he had 700 wives and 300 porcupines. So, which is probably not far from the truth. I just can't imagine logistically keeping up with 1,000 women in your life, I have difficulty with, I'll stop right there. I know it sounds belittling, and I hate that does, but that's the reality of this. Anybody else have an assessment or an observation that you made? Barbara, what you think? What's your thoughts on this story? Well, I'm not talking about that particular part. Any of this that we've looked at tonight in chapters 1 and 2. Okay. Yes. That's an interesting question, and I think it's a question I ask here is why was there a call for a search for somebody like this to lie with David when he has Bathsheba? And I don't know if Haggith is still alive or not. That'd be the mother of Adonijah and Absalom, and he had other wives, and I'm not sure who else left alive here. Absalom, he's dead. Abner's been killed. This is all in 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel stories. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. And women tend to be colder than men from a physical standpoint, right? Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Anybody else have any thoughts on any of the chapter 2, chapter 1 stuff? Okay. I had questions to ponder, and then we just covered question 1. Barbara brought that up. Let's look at question 2. Why do you think Adonijah thought he should be the next king? It makes sense to him. Logic. It seems like that would be his birthright. Do you think, I didn't have this down on the paper, but do you think he was aware that David had promised Solomon the throne? Got a no and a yes. You got a 50% chance on this one, right? Okay. What do y'all think? You don't think he knew? I don't know. But I tend to think he might have. Why else would he made sure he avoided looking at Zadok and Benaiah and Solomon to join him in that party? It just makes sense that it's assumed maybe I am the next king. And there obviously was some port that thought, yeah, that sounds right. Go ahead, Colleen. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If he didn't know about it, there's some tactical move about not inviting Solomon then, because that was the first thing that sticks out in the text is, and they weren't invited. And that's what Nathan says to David, is Solomon wasn't invited. I would invite it. Zadok wasn't invited. Benaiah wasn't invited. So Nathan, I think, has intel here, because what he does tell Bathsheba is if he gets in there as king, I think he's basically saying y'all are dead. That's because a king, to secure the throne, you cut out the possible candidates that could be the threat to that throne. That's what Herod does, right? So I think it's plausible, but we don't know. But I think it's interesting to ponder. That's why I call this questions to ponder. We may not know, but I think there's some good thoughts there. What role did Nathan play in securing the right successor to the throne? Yeah, he expedites. He mitigates. He sees disaster on the horizon, and he heads that off at the pass. And timing is everything here, isn't it? He gets wind of this, and he does not waste time here, so much so that before this other party over here in Rogel can actually get wheels and started in affirmation and it be publicized, he gets this going in Gihon. The timing is perfect because what loud noises there are there, and he could have made a move. I guess he could have, well, we'll be louder and we'll get more support and we'll counteract. But man, when you secure up Jerusalem like that, you might as well throw in the towel, because they garnered the populist vote. They garnered the other side, and I think Adonijah's smart enough to know I'm defeated. I'm not going to win. And he does the next best thing, which I would have done, and that is go grab the horns of that altar. It spared his life. Nathan, I like Nathan as a prophet. I wish we had more insight and intel on Nathan, but how he handled David's sin with Bathsheba, how he handles this situation. He's not one of the writing prophets. I like Nathan. Do y'all like Nathan? He's pretty cool. What did David do to ensure Solomon's throne would be established? And basically what I'm looking at there, look at the strategic steps he goes through. Even in his old age, he's using discernment about what to do. Put him on my mule, right? Go sound a trumpet. Go say. He's instructing them to have the people say, "Live long, King Solomon." He sets all this up. That final thing that he does, in bed, bows to Solomon and worships him. In bed, on his deathbed. All these things are strategic, to ensure that Solomon has the throne, has the seat. And he puts him on the throne. He's on the throne. Right. I love that. And that's interesting. Because remember, when David was kind of vying for Saul's kingdom and not really vying for it. But remember, after the death of Goliath, what are they shouting? Saul has killed his thousands, David his 10,000s, you know. Now, the interesting thing about Solomon is he's not going to be a king of battle, is he? He is not going to be the one like Saul, and definitely not one like David would be. And that's the reason why Solomon was allowed to build the temple and not David, because his hands had shed so much blood. Which instructions did you like in David's charge to Solomon? That part in chapter 2, verses 2 through 9. Which one of those stood out to you? I mean, they're all good instructions. Yes. I like the one where he said, "Act like a man." Don't. And I guess I might be reading more into that possibly than I should, but don't be a mama's boy. You act like a man. Don't do this because of the favor. You know, some could say, well, David feels so bad about what he did about Bathsheba's husband to begin with, that he wanted to do a special favor for Solomon. Don't act as king off of that. Establish your throne by acting like a man. That's kind of what I hear in that. And you know, be strong. Any of God's leaders that were, especially if they were following the footsteps of a leader that was good before them. I mean, Joshua with Moses, you know, be strong and courageous. Meditate on the law day and night. Then you'll have some good success, right? And I think it's interesting about David reminding Solomon that God had told him that if your people watch how they live and walk faithfully with all their heart and soul, you'll never be without a successor on your throne. And that's implication that you need to understand and abide by that same promise, and that promise perpetuates to you, Solomon. And it's Solomon's job to garner the interest of the people to walk humbly, to do these very things. And I cannot help but think who penned Ecclesiastes, when the whole conclusion of man was to do what? Fear God and keep his commandments. Boom, you know? How do you feel with David's final instructions in regards to Joab and Shimei? Huh? It doesn't sound like the gray head went down to the grave in peace. Yeah. Yes. That's correct. Which I think is one reason he jumps ship at the moment he could in support of Adonijah rather than Solomon.
Because David didn't want Absalom killed, but Joab killed him anyway.
Yes.
Why did David tolerate that?
It's hard to you know, there's so many connections there. It's like with Abiathar. You feel there's some kind of, Solomon feels there's some loyalty there because you did carry the ark for my father David, and out of respect of that, you know, there's mercy being shown in this story, and I think that's one of my, I'll get to that in a minute. I'll come back to the mercy thing. But the reason I'm asking this question is I'm wondering, did anybody feel like when you read this story, I'm just asking, okay, I'm not judging, but did you feel like that David hadn't let go of some things and felt vengeful? And his instructions to Solomon is, now you deal with them the way your wisdom leads you to deal with it, but don't let their gray hair go down to the grave in peace. It's like, make sure they get theirs, you know. And I'm not so sure that was appropriate for David to have given such instructions. And it's hairy because here's the thing. Once all of them have been dealt with, the fulfillment of that prophecy about Eli, the completing the charges that David gives Solomon, when every one of them do get killed or dealt with in the right way, then it says in the text, now Solomon's throne was firmly established, as if those threats are now gone. So I'm not saying it wasn't God's will, because it sounds like it was, if you follow me. But I just feel like we're told to kind of act a little different than that. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord, I will repay, right? We don't send out Benaiah here or there to kill off our enemies. But there's a lot of things that happen in the Old Testament that in the Christian age we're not supposed to be doing. That's how I'm looking at that. How do you feel with his instructions regarding the sons of Barzillai? Hey, they showed me favor and let them eat at your table. And we don't really have, at least not in this early part, anything about Solomon's gesturing kindness toward them, but we're just expecting that he probably does. Why did Solomon become upset with Adonijah's request for the Shunammite woman? We've kind of discussed that one already. How do you think Bathsheba felt after Solomon did not fulfill her request? We haven't explored that one, have we, Colleen? We kind of know why would David say after, or Solomon, after having said, I'll do whatever you ask, but then he doesn't. I wonder what happened in the dynamics in the relationship between mom and son then. Yeah. She might feel, I kind of did that. She didn't initiate any of it, but, and probably from there on, she's going to stay quiet. And probably there ain't nobody going to be going to Bathsheba asking Solomon for favors now. You know what I mean? How fair do you think Solomon was with Shimei? I think very fair. And I'll bring it up now because I do feel like Solomon shows mercy to Adonijah after he grabbed the horns of the altar, and to Shimei. You can live here, build your house here, but don't you leave. And in the back of his mind, he's probably thinking this eventually would happen, and it would get both his own conscience clear of showing that mercy, but also take care of what his dad really wanted to happen, that his gray hair don't go down in the grave peacefully. Okay, page 8. These are discussion questions for us to maybe make some applications, and then I have some thoughts to consider that I think are summary points. Question 1, there seems to be an emphasis in this narrative, and this is from chapter 1 and 2, about being held accountable for things done in the past. You see how, do this because of what they did to me back then. Remember how Shimei treated me at Menahem, throwing those insults. Those come back to haunt them, don't they? Those things will come back. Moses wrote this, and I don't have the reference, so if somebody had a phone or Google it or whatever, but I think it's Moses that made the statement, be sure that your sin will find you out. And it does, doesn't it? It's where? Numbers 32:23. Is it Moses that says it? Yeah, that is a book of Moses, so, okay. Be sure that your sin will find you out. That we know that's true from Adam and Eve. I mean, you can't hide it from God. God knows everything. Go ahead, Don. I can't help but think of the Edgar Allan Poe, The Telltale Heart, where you just get that guilty conscience, that beating under the floorboard is just, it just keeps gnawing and gnawing and gnawing. And if you were a fan of Perry Mason like I was, I really loved how in the courtroom scene he would get it out of the suspect. I was just reminded of not a very good scene to watch. I'm not recommending it for Christians, but I was actually doing a little research for my sermon and thought I was reminded of this scene where what is the movie where it's Jack Nicklaus and Tom Cruise and he's Jack Nicklaus is on trial for ordering the code red, and there's a lot of expletives in that. Okay, but basically, you want the truth. I deserve to know the truth. You can't handle the truth. And then, of course, it doesn't take long for him to spill the beans. I did order code red. So, that happens. Sin will gnaw on you. What is it David says in Psalms when he's confessing this sin? My sin is ever before me. It's like it's eating me up. And I know of people who have sat on sin, shameful things they've done, who have worried and fretted and have anxiety over it, and finally it either comes out at the hands of others or they bring it out, who will tell you they feel better that it's off their chest now. They felt better because now they're not trying to hide it. It's still shameful, but there's almost a relief for not having it and hiding anymore. There's that phenomenon there. Okay. What can we do to avoid such consequences of having our past catch up to us? Well, mitigate it for making good decisions right now, so you're building a good history record there, right? But I think, would we all admit that there probably are some, how would I put it, skeletons in the closet in our past, or are there things that we just rather would never come to light? And I think the best way to handle it is to do what the Bible says for us to do. Confess your sins to one another. Admit that you've done these things. Admit that you're wrong and that you're a sinner, because every one of us are, or is. Every one of us. Everyone is, are. Help me out, English teachers. Is. Go ahead, Mom. Oh, yeah. I'll repay anybody I've done wrong by how many fold or whatever. That's good. What are some of the examples where grace is being extended to some of the people in this story? Well, I've already kind of alluded to that too. Solomon, I think, does extend grace to Adonijah, and I think he does to Shimei. And I guess you could say he does for Bathsheba, because he does kind of scold her, but it's nothing more than that. And it possibly could have been, What can we learn and apply from David's charge to Solomon in 1 Kings 2? Act like a man. Well, I mean, men act like a man, right? Then also be strong. Observe what the Lord God requires. Is it Amos the prophet that says, what does the Lord require? To walk humbly and just before God. And again, the fear God and keep his commandments is the conclusion of the whole matter. Those are, Jesus would summarize it this way: the first and second greatest commands. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. On these hang all the law and the prophets. You can summarize that, right? I mean, it's not difficult to understand how to be on God's good side. How would you rate King Solomon's decisions so far? Yeah, as of this point, as of at the end of chapter 2 is how I'm framing that. What'd you say? Towards the end, it kind of goes south. This is before the next chapter where he gets the wisdom. So that's what you're to study next week is chapter 3. You got 5 minutes, so let's... Did you have any comments off of Facebook or YouTube? Say we're here too. Hi, y'all. Hope y'all are doing okay. Here's some bottom line points. If I'm preaching a sermon out of chapters 1 or 2, I'd be looking for I would probably dress this up, alliterate it or whatever, make it, a 3-point sermon or whatever. You know how I do things. But I would be looking for these as the points to drive home. Sometimes God uses others to remind us of his word to us. And I think in the case of David, he had Nathan and Bathsheba to remind him of what he had said to her about Solomon being on the throne. Who are the Nathans or the Bathshebas of your life that can remind you of promises you've made? And that's basically what I'm asking here. Whom has God used in your life to remind you what you need to be reminded of? Well, you've got me on a Sunday morning. I'll remind you that God's good and you've made promises to God. If you're married, you got a spouse that can remind you. I've got my wife, I've got my mom, I've got my kids who have lately called me on the carpet. Dad, you said, those things remind me. So we have an accountability factor, don't we? That's why I think church is so important. The network and circle of friends that we have is to help keep us in check. And we can never do it alone, I think that's vital. Any other comments to that thing, to that point? Sometimes God will use people to remind us. It's important to honor our promises. You think that's true? Yeah. And we could make a list of what promises do we make? Well, you made a promise to God. Yeah, that's just one, but there's a lot going on there in that one promise. If you're married, you've made a promise to your mate for better or worse, sickness, health, prosperity, adversity. I got to learn these because I got 2 or 3 weddings coming up toward the end of the year. So I'm going to learn it. Huh? For richer or poorer, in sickness and health, till death do you part. Those are some promises. You watch me. Okay. How about this one? God's prophecies always come true. Isn't that that's the test of how you know what a true prophet is against a false prophet? If what they say has come true, they're a true prophet. If it doesn't, they're a false prophet. I love that because, that's given to us in Scripture. Here's how you can tell. And we're told to test the spirits. 1 John 4. Not every spirit's from God. Not every teaching's from God. How about this one? There are conditions to living in grace. I thought about this for a long time before I typed this up because I am sold on the idea that grace is yours as a gift that you didn't earn, deserve, pay for. You did not merit it. Y'all agree with that? It's unmerited favor. It's a gift. And yet, there are conditions. Can there be no strings attached in getting it, but conditions that have to be met to receive it? And I think the answer is yes. Is salvation free? I love how Sam thinks. Sam goes deeper. I'm here floating on the surface. Sam wants to dive deep. Well, when you get right down to it, it cost God his son, didn't it? That's where you're going with that. It does. But it's free to me. It's free to me, and yet there's a cost to my discipleship, isn't there? That's correct. You know how Romans puts it in chapter 6 and some of chapter 7, we were slaves to sin, but he set us free. But the language is used now, we're slaves to God. We didn't just get free indeed to do whatever we want. And that's what Romans 6:1's about. What shall we say? Shall we continue in sin so grace can abound? God forbid, right? Mm-hmm.
Well, if grace doesn't have strings attached or expectation, then the Baptist are right.
Right. And you know, when you talk about the word strings, and I'm thinking now we're looking at that word agape love, that is unconditional love. But unconditional love does not mean unconditional responses. Unconditional love was given to you regardless of what you do or don't do. So I would point to, for example, 1 John 1, where it says, if we walk in the light as he is in the light, there's a condition there. Then he's faithful and just to continue to forgive our sins. But there's the if word, which means there's something I do. Oh, I'm out of time. Okay, distractions can cause us to forget about promises. I'm just thinking of Shimei, the two slaves running off. It's been 3 years. Either he didn't think about it or he's forgotten in 3 years' time and is not thinking about it. Yeah. I can do this without anybody knowing. When division occurs, we need to be careful with where our loyalty lies. That's the final point, I think. Did y'all have any additional points? Y'all like that lesson? Securing the throne is really more about how we apply it to us. It's more about how do we secure our future by following the King who's really King indeed, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, that's Jesus Christ. So we pledge our allegiance to him, and all things hang off of that priority, all that primary directive. And so I'll close with that Matthew 6:33, seek first his kingdom, not yours. Adonijah wanted to seek for a kingdom of himself. How many people are still trying to do that today? Seek his kingdom first, and all these other things will be added to you. And to these people whom Solomon expressed mercy to, Adonijah and Shimei, at least in the beginning, worked well for them until they went awry. It will work well for us as long as we keep God first and what his agenda is about. All right, we'll see you Sunday morning. Father's Day is coming up. I'll be here next Wednesday night. Read chapter 3. The lesson title is A Wise Choice and a Bold Ruling. So we'll keep plugging along here.